lot of people, when they hear my testimony, the first thing they think is I was raised in a family that wasn't a good family. I was raised in a family that was born-again Christian. My mom, my dad. But I'm the one that made some bad choices, and I started making them at a very young age. I started smoking dope at 11 years old, started doing hard drugs at 13, putting a needle in my arm at 15 years old, and my family had nothing to do with any of that. I mean, I chose to go that route. Started selling drugs, went from selling drugs to being a shotgunner for drug deals, like a hired gun, you know. So I'd done a lot of bad things over the years, a lot, you know, and then it kept getting deeper and deeper, you know. I could never rob a store or anything because my dad would kill me, you know. But I started robbing drug dealers.
I've done a lot of things that I ain't proud of. Hurt a lot of people.
You can't keep going the way you've been going.
Help me.
In 1985, I was in a really bad bar fight in Florida, and I almost got shot that night. And I come home, I told my wife, I said, we're moving. And my wife says, what? And I said, we're moving out of here. And she said, why? And I said, well, somebody's going to end up killing me, and I'm going to die for no reason. And I said, we're moving. So we moved back to my hometown in Pennsylvania. My wife immediately started going to church with my mom. Her and my mom almost like started being best friends. My mom's born again, you know, and all her life she was born again. So I started getting angry with God. It was like God just stole my woman. You know, my woman was still there cooking, washing the clothes, but now God's getting all of the attention. And I was literally getting angry with God. And so it went on for almost 2 years, and finally she just kept asking me all the time, Sam, why don't you come to church with me, come to church. So sometimes us men will agree to do something just to get you women to be quiet. So anyways, there was a guy from South Africa that was preaching at the church. So I went in to hear this guy, and he gave an altar call, and I didn't get up. There was no way I would get up. And he come walking back to me, and he said, you know, the power of God is all over you. What is your problem? I broke in the back seat of this Assembly of God church. I started weeping, gave my heart to the Lord. They were in the middle of a camp meeting going on there. And well, anyways, I went back the next night. Well, the next night, this preacher, you know, gave an altar call, and I was already setting up front the second night, you know, because I wanted a little bit more what I got the first night. So when he gave the altar call, I just jumped right up. Well, the man started prophesying over me. Well, the more he would prophesy, the madder I got. And I figured there's a 48-hour clause when you first get saved, you can beat a preacher up. No, I just made that up. But anyways, I figured I'm gonna find this guy after church, and I'm gonna beat him up outside. So I waited outside of the church. The preacher come walking through the door. I started cursing him. I started cussing at him, telling him, don't you tell me I'm going to Africa, because he was prophesying over me that I was going to Africa, and this was June of 1992, that I was going to be in a war. Everything that's happening in my life now is what he was prophesying. And I wasn't going to Africa. So anyways, when I cursed him, told him what I was going to do, all he did was looked at me and he said, we'll see. Well, that was in 1992, June, and the end of 98, first part of 99, I find myself in Sudan, Africa.
I'm here today to talk to you about families just like yours, half a world away, that desperately need your help.
I was thinking maybe I could go over there.
Africa?
Reckon they can do with all the help they can get. I'll be back before you know it.
The biggest problem in South Sudan right now is the president of Northern Sudan, Bashir. People need to realize that this is the man that had war crimes charges put up on him, that he's caused a genocide in Darfur. He has had the war crime charges put on him, and he threw him down and he laughed. This man needs to be brought to justice. So my hope is that what is going on in other countries where people is tired of the presidents harming the country, where they're going to step in and say, we want you out.
You in the army or something?
We are freedom fighters.
I'm Sam. Nice to meet you. I want to go into Sudan this weekend. Need someone to show me around.
This is a war zone. If you stay here, you're going to get killed.
It's safer to sleep here than in our own homes.
They ain't sleeping out here.
There are too many. You can't help them all.
Gotta take as many as we can. Tell the other ones we'll come back later.
I need the money for an extra vehicle so that I can save some children.
Calm down.
Don't tell me to calm down!
I have an organization that is worldwide, Angels of East Africa. And so Angels of East Africa, I mean, is in South Sudan. We're working in Uganda. I'm working in Ethiopia. Anywhere that we can rescue a child is where we're working. You know, the big thing was when I was in that bar fight in Florida and almost got killed. I knew then that my life was going to end in a very violent act, and I was going to die for nothing. I don't have a problem with dying, but I have a problem with what I'm going to die for. And so I wanted just to get out of that. And I help a lot of people to give them a second chance in life. But if you want them to be successful, the first thing you got to do is relocate that person. Get them out of the lifestyle that they were living into a new lifestyle again. In the U.S., we have a church in a campground in Pennsylvania. So we work with hard, troubled youth. Eventually our campground is going to be set up to bring in some of the hardest core youth around the U.S. to bring them in for a week, maybe on up to like 2 weeks. And the people that's going to be working with the youth is going to be people like me, people that was almost spent their life in prison and stuff. And a lot of guys that I run with have spent 10 years, 20 years in prison. These are the same guys that's going to work with OK the Troubled Youth, using our testimonies in order to change your life. Shekinah Fellowship is the name of our church, and we got several cabins. We're on 40-some acres, and then we got 20 acres behind it, so it's like 60-some acres in the middle of the woods, you know. So there's ponds there for fishing, boating for the kids. If you would get the opportunity just to come to our church, you would see how many lives that we reach here in the U.S. If you started interviewing the church, you would find out that there's people that were drug addicts, drug dealers, alcoholics in our church. And the thing about us is we don't give up on anyone. The only way, and we still won't give up on you, but the only way that we're going to forget about you is if you walk away from us. But otherwise, it doesn't matter if you've messed up. It don't matter the bad things that you have done. We're always there for the people. And when you hear the stories from some of these people, you'll see that our church is like a second chance church. It's kind of all about, you know, giving that person that second chance. Something that I say in about every interview, that I don't want people to think that this movie is about Sam Childers or about rescuing children in Africa. This movie, after you watch it, it's all about you. What are you going to do now? And that's what I want people to walk out of the theater thinking about, not Sam Childers, but about their self. What am I going to do now to make a difference? What am I going to fully make a commitment to? And I believe that there's children around the world. Is there problems inside of Sudan? Absolutely. There's serious problems in Sudan right now to this day. They got their independence now, but they're building an infrastructure from nothing, you know. But I believe that there's children around the world, and if God moves on you to work in the U.S., to work in China, Thailand, wherever He moves on you to work at, do your very best.
That's the orphanage that I'm going to build in Sudan.
They talk about you, the children.
Just trying to help these people. Same as you.
The entire rebel army has put a bounty on your head.
I must be doing something right.
They burn it down. Ain't nothing left. It's over.
Get off your butt and build it again. You hear me?
I don't know why God chose me, you know. But you got to remember, God chose all of us. Now, are you willing to go down the road that I had to go all these years for God to literally take you somewhere to the top. You know, people only see me now in the theaters, but they didn't see the past 15 years of all the hardship I went through, all the tears. They didn't see all the pain. They didn't see me not being around my daughter for 15 years of her life. I got a grandbaby now that I hardly ever get to hold. You know, so people don't see all the sacrifice. They only see some of the glory and think it's always been like that, but it hasn't been. But I guarantee you, no matter who you are, if you're willing to go through that sacrifice, God will take you to the same place that He's taken me.
Sam, wait.
See what waiting gets you?
This place does not need more guns.
Why don't you fight the evil in this place your way and let me fight it mine? Helping you kids is about the only good thing I've ever done in this life. You got no idea what I'm saying, do you?
I started an orphanage in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a war zone. One man. Now it's one of the largest orphanages in South Sudan. And it was started with a mosquito net hanging in a tree. You know, so when you look at that, I mean, that's one amazing thing. I wrote a book a number of years ago, or excuse me, I wrote a book 2 years ago. But 30 years ago, I couldn't read or write. So, I mean, there's another one. You know, God has just done miracle after miracle in my life, you know. Most of the LRA right now are in the Congo. Some people will say that many of them are destroyed, but we can't say that when they're still raiding villages and killing hundreds of people. It wasn't but a few weeks ago, and there's 200 and some people killed. You know, so most of them are in the Congo, but they say that some of them has already headed into Darfur and joined up with, the Janjaweed. So I don't believe that they are close to being defeated until they're all finished. There's hundreds, probably thousands of children all around us here. And many of them don't have a real good life. You can see that, okay? But it's something when you can take a child that might not have a good life, maybe the schooling's not good, maybe the food they're eating is not good, but they still get a smile on their face. They'll still laugh and giggle and end up playing. Children are the same all around the world. And I believe sometimes the more a child has, the spoiler they get, you know, because in America, there's a lot of children that just aren't thankful for everything they got. But I noticed in Africa, you can take a bottle of soda and you can give it to 10 children and they'll take little sips until everyone gets a sip. And they just keep passing it around, sharing it. You don't see that a lot in America. Yeah, you don't see that a lot. There was people dying, and I knew that I could do something about it. You know, James chapter 4, verse 17 says, if you know you should do something and not do it, you have sinned. And I know from the first time I went into Sudan, I knew for a fact that I could save someone. And I didn't realize that it was going to end up going over, now it's way over 1,000 children. I stopped counting. I don't even count anymore. You know, counting was for me, and it's not about me. So now it's just about kids.
Here you go. Okay. Is everything okay? All right. Good. Thank you.
So what's it really going to take to have a lasting peace in southern Sudan? I mean, this, like I said, it's been going on for years and years and years, and now they've got, looks like freedom.
You know, I believe that...
Good job, young man. See, we only get the best in here. Best music, best customers. I mean, this is cool. It's good to see. You know, my memories of Sam Childers before all this big thing happened with you in the Sudan as this Pentecostal preacher in this suit jacket and tie and that was, preaching these campfire, these camp meeting kind of things and
I
but
still do camp meetings.
There was a whole life, man, a whole life in Detroit. It was you were a pretty nasty character.
They filmed in Detroit, but I was actually raised and lived my rough life in Grand Rapids, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and then I moved from there to Orlando, Florida, and that's when things really got crazy when I was down there. Yeah, I mean,
why? I mean,
I was raised in a perfect family.
Right.
A lot of people tries to blame their past on their family. I can't do that. I was raised in a perfect family. At 11 years old, I started doing drugs. I was raised in a Christian family.
Right.
But I just started doing drugs at 11 years old. 13 years old, I'm doing hard drugs. 15 years old, I'm sticking a needle in my arm. 17, 18 years old, I'm a heroin addict. And Tim, a lot of people in this area didn't realize that I had a testimony like that because I hid it. I hid that testimony. And when you remember me as that preacher that was in the suit and everything, I was still hiding my testimony. And one day God said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm preaching, God." And he said, "No, what are you doing for the kingdom of God?" I found myself preaching to Christians. I found myself preaching to Christians that were stumbling a little bit. But I didn't find myself doing what God wanted me to do, and that was kingdom building. If you want to do kingdom building, tell your testimony.
That's right.
And you got to tell it all. A lot of times, I was in this church one time, and I got up there and I started giving my testimony, and afterwards my mom said, "You don't have to tell everybody that, Sam." But you know what? Unless we tell it all, how will people know that Jesus Christ is in the miracle working business today? They need to know the whole story,
Yeah, well, he did amazing things to you. I mean, your mom must have had kneecap. It said the Apostle John had kneecaps like camels, and your mom must have had those too. Because being a praying Christian woman,
it was amazing. Because my mom lost a little girl, before me, and she had a nervous breakdown, and finally, she was sitting outside one day, and God said to her, "Daisy, you have 2 more children out there." And she was looking out at my brothers. Well, anyway, she went to a church service, old-fashioned camp meeting. I love preaching under a tent. Old-fashioned camp meeting. And a minister said, "The child that you're going to conceive is going to be a preacher one day." And so anyway, she went home that night and got with my dad. She says, "That's the night I got conceived." Well, anyways, and then she went back when she was pregnant to another camp meeting. And another minister prophesied over her, "The child you're carrying is going to be a preacher." Make a long story short, she did it again when I was like 5 years old, standing beside of her. And the minister said, "The child that is here with you is going to be a preacher one day." Well, when I was like 13 years old, 14, 15, she thought they were all liars. No. But anyways, the thing about my mom, she never stopped praying. Even at 18 years old, I was dealing drugs. 19 years old, I was a shotgunner. She never stopped praying, and she hung on to the prophecies of God. She hung on to them. And it finally came true when I was in my early 30s.
I can imagine Joseph doing the same thing. I mean, here he's prophesied that he's going to be, a ruler over his family, and he ends up enslaved and in prison, and the same thing. I mean, it's a faithfulness of God, despite yourself. And as like the devil and you did everything you could to destroy your own life, and God said, "Not going to let it happen."
Tim, I'm going to tell you something. I believe that we're in the last days right now, and I believe there's going to be an outpouring of the Spirit of God upon this country. And the only way it's going to happen is if we all stand up and start giving our testimonies and start telling people what Jesus Christ has done for them. People need to see change. They need to see miracles. There's people out there that don't go to church because they hear about the garbage that's going on in the church. Come on, let's clean the churches up. And let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to what Jesus Christ is all about.
Well, it's the Old Testament says that if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then God hears from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land. It's the idea of the church. Judgment begins in the house of God first. and then God is able to reach the rest of the nation.
You know, I think another thing, as Christians, we got to stop trying to be that righteous person. You know, come on. The Bible says that none of us is without sin. If we say that we are, we make God a liar. We need to stop trying to be righteous, start trying to be real. That's what Jesus Christ wants from us, to be real. And I tell you what, the people out there that don't know him, they're all watching us. And when they see real people, they want to start following them. I'd have to say I never really knew a whole lot what was going on in Sudan or inside of northern Uganda. I went on a 5-week mission trip, and one of the reasons we went there was to actually work on some buildings. And when I was there on this 5-week mission trip, we were coming probably halfway through the trip. I went into the bush. Well, naturally, going into the bush, you'll see a lot of the things. You'll see really what's going on inside of Africa. But I come across the body of a small child that stepped on a landmine, and I couldn't understand how could we allow this to go on. And I stood over the body and said, God, I'll do anything I can to end up helping these people. Well, I was back in Sudan 3 months later, supporting and helping the people pull out the landmines. So then it just kept going deeper and deeper. I'd done that for a good amount of time, and then ended up running a mobile clinic for a good amount of time. And then one day as we were driving through the bush, God said to me, stop. And this was a very area he wanted me to build, the children's village. So we started building this children's village. I mean, and a lot of people, they say, well, we got to wait till we get the budget before we can start this project. I never had the budget to start anything. I just knew I had to do something. If you wait around till you get the money to do something, you're not even going to do anything. So I always encourage people, if you feel led to do it, get up and just start it. So anyways, we started the children's village. We run into a lot of difficulties, and but I never gave up. I kept going on. Even down to this day, we'll run into difficulties, but I never end up giving up. But now we have 3 projects in Uganda. We have the project in South Sudan. We actually expanded into Ethiopia. We're getting ready to do work in Somalia. So it keeps growing and growing on us now.
Yeah, it's just really amazing work, what you're doing. What are you scared when you go down there, or were you when you originally started? There was civil wars going on. And
I would be lying if I said I never get scared. I mean, I get scared a lot, but when it comes right down to it, I never had a problem with dying. I got more of a problem, with living. But if we worry about what something's going to cost us, you can never rescue anybody, especially a child. I mean, so I always tell people, if you're going to be a rescuer, you can't count the cost, you can't think about it, because if you begin to do that, then it's going to be too late and you're not able to rescue someone.
What's the most difficult part about being down in Africa? I
think the hardest thing to realize when you do the work that I do is you can't rescue them all. This movie gave us a platform to speak out about the truth of what's going on in Sudan, Darfur, and also South Sudan. South Sudan just got their independence July 9th of this year. And a lot of people that know a little bit of South Sudan, they think, well, everything's good there now. It's not true. They're still fighting in Abyei, there's fighting in the Nuba, there's fighting in the Blue Nile. But the big thing is there's still thousands of children dying per month inside of Darfur. We got to look where the problem's coming from. The problem from all of this is coming from President Bashir, the president of Northern Sudan. This man is the only president in all of history to have war crime charges placed on him, and he's still in office. All of the little rebel groups, like if you watch the movie, you'll see it's the Lord Resistant Army, the LRA, but they're fully financed by the president of Northern Sudan, Bashir. So off of this movie, it gives me a very good platform that I'm able to speak out of what's really going on in these countries. And it's not just Sudan, surrounding countries like if you follow the Lord Resistant Army now, they're actually held up in the Congo, and they're coming in and out of Sudan. So you got even the surrounding countries are being affected by this president, Bashir. I believe his days are numbered. If we take note to what's going on around the world now, people are tired of dictators running countries. They're tired of murderers running countries. So my hope, my prayer is that this country, Northern Sudan, is going to get a taste of freedom and going to see other countries living freedom, and they're going to say, we want the same thing, we need to push Bashir out of office.
How does that happen, though? What are the people?
You know, look at what happened in Libya. I mean, it's happening all around. It's when people take a stand and they say, we're tired of dictatorship, we're tired of a murderer being in place. I mean, this man has war crime charges placed against him. I believe that the only thing that got to happen is a country needs to stand up. The people got to stand up and say, we want freedom, and then the world to back him. And this man could be taken out of office.
Do you think the people are scared to try and revolt?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, he's caused a genocide in Darfur. He has even made claims that when the South separated, he said that he was going to run the North under Arabic law. And if they start that, that's going to give every Christian or every non-believer a problem, because when you're under Arabic law, you're going to run everything as if you are a radical Muslim.
Yeah. So what's it like to have Gerard Butler play you in a film?
I didn't know Gerard Butler to start with, okay? I don't watch a lot of TV. I will say my daughter did know him, and everyone asked, what do I think of Gerard? You know, I'm a hillbilly from Pennsylvania, so I didn't know the guy, but my daughter knew who he was. But the United States rate him as one of the top 10. He's actually, the last I heard, number 3 in actors right now. So I got to say, I mean, yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
Could they pick someone a little better looking though?
Right. Well, he ended up asking my wife. He asked my wife, he said, what do you think about me playing your husband? And she said, well, I thought they'd have picked somebody a little better looking. So I always joke with him about it. But one thing I will say, I was a little concerned how he was going to do. He has a strong Scottish accent. The guy done amazing. I don't know what happened to it. He done amazing, amazing job. The other concern that I had was that he wasn't just going to use his acting skills from up here, that he was going to get it here in his heart. And he did. In some of the scenes, or not some of them, many of the scenes, you could see in his eyes, he got it. He caught the compassion. He caught the storms, the trials, everything that I've went through over the years. He got it.
How were you able to be on the set at all? Or
you know, I spent a few weeks with him, but you got to remember, a good movie starts with a good script. Mm-hmm. We had a guy from Hollywood that wrote the script. Okay, Jason Keller came in. He spent about a year with me, and I mean, he literally moved into my life for like a year. So he wanted to get the script written as close as he could to my life. Then naturally, you got to have a good director. We had Mark Forrester, which is also one of the top 10 directors. He came in. Mark and the screenwriter, Jason, went to Sudan. So they spent a week and a half in Sudan to get it all down as close as they could. Then came Gerard Butler. Gerard Butler spent a few weeks with me here in Pennsylvania, actually came into my area and lived. I spent some time with him in LA, spent a lot of time with him on the phone and everything. He actually heard me preach a few times. So he wanted to catch the character. I will say that everybody in this movie done the very best and went over and beyond to put out the best movie they could.
It's exciting. And you're in support of the film and you want everyone to go see it?
Absolutely. I will say, I have a lot of people ask me, well, Sam, what do you think of the finished product? If I didn't approve of it, I wouldn't be here. The movie is based on a book that I wrote and stuff. It's called Another Man's War. I encourage everyone that sees the movie and has questions, buy the book. You can go to any bookstore and get it, or you can go to our website and even get it. But you'll see that the whole movie is based on things that's in the book. Some of the action scenes are amped up. That's just Hollywood. There's a few little things that was Hollywood, but the base of the movie is the truth. It's based on the truth. The timeline is really messed up because you got 30-some plus years bunched together in order to make a 2-hour movie.
Well, it was a very entertaining film, so it was a lot of fun. And,
great.
My friend that I went with last night, she was in tears by the end of it. So
I know. I've seen it 7 times now, and I cry every time. And one of the things that's happening to people when they come out of the movie, most people are going to see the movie either because Gerard Butler or Sam Childers. But after you see the movie, it's not about Sam Childers anymore. It's about what are you going to do now. So I'm hoping that this movie is going to motivate a lot of people to stand up and do something around the world. And I hope that they're going to be motivated. It's not just about African children. It's about rescuing children around the world. We have children even here in the U.S. that's dying, and there's something each and every one of us can do. And I tell people all the time, if you don't know much about Africa, educate yourself, get on the internet, educate yourself, find a nonprofit out there that's doing a work that you're comfortable with, support them. If you don't have someone that you know like that, get on our website and support us.
Can I check out your tattoo quickly?
Yeah.
Did you get that before the movie, or?
No, I've ended up having it for several months and stuff. I covered up another one I had there.
Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
It's an ancient ritual performed by Muslims unique to northern Sudan. They are the whirling dervishes. And if it's strange to our eyes, then it's just as alien to the people of southern Sudan. For here, they're Christians and animists. And such differences make Sudan a religious, tribal, and cultural cauldron. This is a story about Black Africa meeting Islamic North Africa. It's a meeting of cultures and religions that was destined for conflict. When Sudan gained its independence 37 years ago, the colonial powers decreed for their own vested interests that it should remain one country. And because of that, the Sudanese people were set on a course that led inevitably to the war and famine that blights this nation today. To reach the rebel-held south, you must start in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. And journalists in this part of the world need a guide. Someone like Jacob Akol, a Dinka tribesman of southern Sudan. The first rite of passage is a visit to the Nairobi headquarters of the rebel Sudan People's Liberation Army, the SPLA. The SPLA's military wing holds much of southern Sudan. Here they issue permissions to travel and propaganda.
This is Dr. Justin Yaj. The center of power in Khartoum, it must be dismantled because we are not there.
Like most of the SPLA, Dr. Justin is a Christian, opposed to the Islamic regime of the north.
If I'm not acceptable because I'm a Christian and all these things, then something must be drastically wrong about the Sudan.
The SPLA gives us a guarantee of safe passage, but it's an uncertain guarantee at best. Last year, rebels killed 3 aid workers and a journalist in one incident alone. Lokichokio, northern Kenya, the front line of the International Food Aid Programme. It's where the big planes are forced to stop. The annual flood of the Nile headwaters makes impossible swamps of the rough airstrips of southern Sudan. So from here, aid workers fly light aircraft, often for hours, across war zones, onto muddy strips in unsafe areas. And they do it daily. Jacob's own childhood was spent barely 50 kilometers away from this village of Preache. Like these children, he too was a young refugee. He fled alone and on foot in the face of civil war.
It's almost like a continuation of my life. 30 years ago, I was displaced from southern Sudan by the same war, and it is sad to see that it is continuing for so long.
What strikes you first about southern Sudan is just how lush it is. It seems like some terrible mistake, people starving to death amidst such plenty. But this is rainy season. The harvest isn't in yet. And in the past, when harvest time comes, so does a new military offensive.
This is the result. Year after year it happens. Hundreds of thousands of half-starved people leaving their crops to wither, fleeing the fighting, descending on feeding centres, and dying in their uncounted thousands. There are only a handful of feeding centres scattered through this, the largest country in Africa. Across hundreds of thousands of square kilometres, no one really knows what's happening. There are no body counts out here.
Nature has bequeathed southern Sudan fertile lands, even plentiful oil reserves. Yet its children starve, its economy is decimated. They remain free from the clutches of the hated regime in Khartoum, but the cost is terrible.
We set out along one of southern Sudan's countless waterlogged tracks.
Are we going to get through this?
I don't know. We may want to go around this way. Looks like it's a bit more sandy on this side.
Be back.
We're soon hopelessly bogged, and suddenly at the mercy of a band of guerrilla fighters. Our safety is supposedly guaranteed, but only by the main SPLA faction. We have no such agreement with renegade factions which now fight each other as bitterly as once they fought government troops. Luck is with us. We've stumbled upon a friendly unit.
I'm a commander of Tarawil, independent area.
The commander tells us he's retreating from a frontline position facing government troops because his hometown is threatened by a breakaway rebel force. After 10 years, the SPLA has started splitting into tribal-based factions. Colonel Garang, it seems to me, as an outsider, that you have something of a disaster on your hands at the moment. You have a ceasefire that's not holding. You still have thousands of your own people in the south starving or close to starving. And you also have an appalling split within your own ranks. Do you see it that way yourself?
Well, it's any war is a disaster, including our own, including the Second World War, including the First. All wars are disasters. What has happened in the SPLM is that a portion of the movement under Riek Machar and Lamakol has technically joined the enemy. It's a defection. It is not a split. Somewhere on our side, they have now gone on the Sudan government side. Some do defect from the Sudan government side to come to our side. That is the meaning of a civil war.
But it is a catastrophic split and a godsend for the government in Khartoum. Where once Soviet-made planes like this one delivered bombs, today it's delivering grain. Grain donated to the UN by the Khartoum government.
Initially, the administration outrightly refused to receive the plane from Khartoum for fear that it was poisoned.
So anything that comes out of Khartoum is immediately treated as being suspicious, presumably, is that right?
Without a doubt, immediately presumed as suspicious.
It's a gift from the enemy. For the Khartoum regime, with an international reputation of massive and shocking abuse of human rights, has launched a charm offensive. Sudan's Islamic capital, Khartoum. After years of self-imposed isolation, the regime is courting international opinion. It's become known as Khartoum's charm offensive. A charm offensive, though, is that a fair enough description of what you're working on?
That's an interesting term, I would say.
Is it an accurate one?
It's not. I don't think it's exactly a charm offensive. It's an attempt at trying to make the world perceive us as we are.
To perceive the regime for ourselves, we're allowed to see Sharia law in action. Islamic courts seen in the West as infamous.
This is the outlook of the West, and it is because of the punishments provided in Sharia. For example, in theft, the amputation of the arm, in adultery, the stoning and the lashing, which are viewed by the West as being cruel and unusual. Actually, for us, Sharia has been extremely tolerant.
But the Christians of the South don't trust the alien principles of Sharia and cannot believe government assurances that the Sharia will not be forced upon them. For although Islam preaches forgiveness and tolerance, the Khartoum regime stands accused of utter intolerance. Can you tell me, how do you feel as Minister for Justice in a country that has been slated by organizations like Amnesty International as having the worst human rights records in the world?
This does not fit with our character, with our religious beliefs, and with our tolerance. These accusations are the product of the opposition, which is in exile.
Well, mostly because they say they're afraid to come back.
Yes, and they want to come back as people in authority.
But Southerners say what they really want is simply to share the power.
The issue is that of justice, is that of freedom, is that of democracy, is that of development, opportunity for all, irrespective of race, irrespective of religion. And we are not unique in this. This is how nations are formed.
So you've not been defeated, but under the circumstances, can you hope for victory?
Well, it depends on what you mean by victory. Military victory, I don't think the Sudan government has any illusions that they can achieve military victory over us. We don't have any illusions that we are going to overrun Khartoum tomorrow.
Jacob Ackel has heard the arguments countless times before. Not once have they seemed any closer to resolving the plight of the victims caught in the middle.
Almost all of them are agreed that this war cannot be solved by continuing to fight. Yet they can't find that political solution. And the people who are suffering from that are the innocent people, the people we are looking at the moment.
Jacob's brought us to a place called Congo, in what's called South Sudan's Death Triangle. As many as 250,000 people have already perished in this region. There's been so much fighting, aid workers daren't stay overnight. The mainstream SPLA says an attack by renegade commander Colonel Riak is imminent. Commander, I've been informed that you are expecting an attack from the Riak forces soon. Is that true?
Yeah, you know, I cannot deny it. It can be true because Riek has no objective. His objective is to destroy SPLA, is to fight us. He's not fighting the Sudanese government. So now his target is here.
The reports proved accurate. Within 12 hours of our leaving, Congo was under attack. These men were back in battle. The relief centers were closed. The staff evacuated.
Sam, thank you so much for being with us today.
Praise God.
It is an honor. It is an honor. Now,
Good to
I
be
have
here.
to tell you, for those who don't know you, I want them to get up to speed. In doing some research on you before today and today's interview, I have to say that I was reading that, got a little frightened, and thought, this is one bad dude.
Yeah, some people say I still am, so I try to keep the reputation up. You know, the older you get, you got to keep that reputation.
That's right.
You know, keep all the young guys from trying to take you on again, you know.
I have figured that out. The older I get,
Yeah.
the bigger my sons get, the more I have to remind them.
Absolutely.
But you know, here's the thing. God has a way of taking things. I remember when I came to the cross and I gave him my whole life, I said, now there are some qualities in here that you're going to have to turn around and use for your good. Tell our viewers a little bit about who Sam is and how he got started.
I started out in the perfect family, okay? My family were born-again Christians, went to Assembly of God Church. My dad made, like middle-class money. I mean, so I wasn't in a poor family that pushed me out into the drug fields. They were always backing me, everything that I did. But at 11 years old, and I know a lot of people get shocked when they hear this, I started smoking marijuana. And, you know, in some states they try to legalize marijuana.
Right.
I say that marijuana is a gateway drug to all the other drugs. Yes, you start with marijuana, it does lead to something else. So anyways, I started smoking dope at probably like 11 years old. 13 years old, I started doing hard drugs, acid. 14, 15 years old, started doing cocaine. At 15 and 16, I'm shoving a needle in my arm. At 18, 19 years old, there was like 2 years of my life where I was actually a heroin addict. I had to do heroin, cocaine, and I'd get up in the morning, first thing in the morning, sit on the toilet, shove a needle in my arm. And it kept going deeper. I started dealing drugs in order to pay for the habit. I was always really good with a gun because I was raised like a hillbilly in the mountains of Pennsylvania. Started shooting at a very young age. I started hunting at a very young age. So I became a shotgunner for drug deals, and that's basically a hired gun to make sure the drug deals go good, you know. And it just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then there was one day where I was actually in a gunfight in Orlando, Florida. And when I come home that night, the next morning I woke up and I told my wife, I said, we got to get out of here. Because I knew at that point of my life that somebody was going to kill me. I never had a problem with dying, but I always had a problem with what am I willing to die for? And I didn't want to die for the life that I was living. And that's when the change started.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Karen Dye, and you're watching New Horizons. Sam Childers is with us today. Now, Sam, you have shared some amazing stories and miraculous stories where you know that the hand of God was on your life. Otherwise, I don't think you'd be sitting here talking to me right now. And He has given you a bigger mission and a bigger purpose. And your heart, as hard as it was, He remained in control of part of it to keep it soft. And so now you're working for these children in Africa and in the Sudan and just doing some amazing things and opening the orphanage. You say it all turned around for you as far as getting the word out about what you were doing when you were interviewed on Dateline NBC.
Yeah.
God is so cool in the way He does those things.
I'm telling you.
So what happened after that?
I wasn't just interviewed by Dateline NBC. Dateline NBC actually sent a camera crew into Africa with me. And here they started seeing how I was rescuing the children of South Sudan from this army called the Lord Resistant Army, Joseph Kony. So anyways, as I was rescuing the children back, they'd done this story. And it was really amazing because I'll never forget when it came out. It was in the spring of 2005, I believe it was, May or June, almost in May. I was sitting on the couch with my wife, and when the show aired, I started crying because they made me out to be a mercenary. And I'll never forget this. All I could see was myself walking down the road with all these children with a machine gun on my back and a pistol in my side, and they made me out to be this mercenary, and I started crying. I said to my wife, I said, every church that ever had me in is never going to have me back again. The whole ministry is going to fall apart. From that day forth, or that afternoon that it was aired, our website crashed by morning. We had so many hits. I went from preaching in churches of 50 or 100 to 1,000 or 5,000 because everyone wanted to know what gave me that power to go in there to fight this evil man that was plumb full of the devil, because they wanted to put it to the same work here in America in spiritual warfare.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, everything kind of turned around. So I preach in churches of 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 people now. I still preach in small churches, but most of the time what I preach is how to literally fight spiritual warfare.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because that really is what it is, isn't it, Sam?
Absolutely.
And a lot of people would watch you and think, oh, this is just a guy who loves a fight. This is just a guy who wants to go in. But this is a guy who God changed and then took what he's good at and is now using it to fight
what I
that
found
battle.
out, and what a lot of Christians don't realize, it's easy to go out here and fight physically.
Right.
That's the easiest thing there is. You don't have to be too smart to do it. You know, we just heard what you do at the buffet. If they run, I mean, if they run out, somebody gets it. Yeah, I mean, what is it at Arby's? If they run out of horseradish sauce, there's trouble.
That's right.
But you know what? It's easy for us to blow up like that and to fight.
That's right.
But when it's spiritual, and we got to literally get down and begin to pray and to pray through. You know, the average Christian nowadays, come on, I got a little gray hair on me. I know what it is to pray through. I remember back when I was a kid, when Mom and Dad would go to the church, somebody would need a deliverance. They'd say, all right, we're going to pray this thing through. And it was like, oh no, I got to sleep on the pew again tonight. Because we knew we weren't leaving until you were prayed through, you know. But that's a lot of what I take it, and I take the fighting in the battlefield and I turn it around to the fighting in the battlefield here in America. Because no matter what, each and every one of us, if you don't have a fight today and you don't have one tomorrow, get ready because it's coming this week.
That's exactly
And you
right.
will have a fight. But that's when the book started.
I was going to say, now tell us about the book, Another Man's
What happened was the very next day we had close to 300 emails from book writers to movie producers, you name it. Everyone you could imagine was emailing us. And I took only one of them and put it in my briefcase. Only one email. Tossed all the other ones. I'm in L.A. Somebody got a hold of me about writing a book, and I'm in L.A., and I called this one lady. I met this person, and I called this lady, and the next thing I known, this lady said, Sam, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. And here I am. Here's the man that was doing drugs during school. Right. Here's the man that 30 years ago couldn't read or write, and I just finally learned how to read and couldn't write very good. Going to write a book? So anyways, this lady talked me into putting my story on paper. So that's what I did. And then it went from not just a normal book. Thomas Nelson bought the book rights. You know, a lot of people write books. I sold my book to Thomas Nelson, and it was done as a hardback book.
It's an amazing thing how God takes the things of the foolish.
Yeah, absolutely.
To confound the wise. You also have a movie that you're working on that will be coming out.
Just recently, I sold the motion picture rights, and you know, it's something because I have no education besides the Holy Spirit, and people wanted to buy my book rights, my movie rights, my reality rights. They wanted to buy it all at one time, and I said no, no. I sold everything separately. And so I sold the movie rights, so there's a movie coming out. Gerard Butler is going to play the leading role. And see, here's something about God. When God truly does something, and it's God in it, He does it to the full extent.
Over and above.
Lionsgate is involved in it. Mark Forrester is the director of the movie, which, I mean, he's one of the top 10 in Hollywood. Gerard Butler is like rated at number 3 in Hollywood right now. The guy that done the screenwriting, Jason Keller, is literally one of the top 10 in Hollywood too. So that's being done, but listen, God's not finished. You know, sometimes we start getting up here with God's work, we think He's done, so we're going to relax, but God says He's not done. So I kept my reality show rights, so we actually have a reality show that will be coming out in 2011 that is all about giving people a second chance.
There's so much to this man's story, and we only have a half hour to tell it in, and I know that something that really is on your heart is your mission that you do in Darfur, and we have about 30 seconds.
I just started in Darfur. What I want to close with is we have a budget we're trying to meet by the end of October, and there's people in Darfur right now that are literally eating dirt. You've seen the video. They're drinking water that we could not even give to an animal to drink. We're going in to increase our feeding program and drill wells, and I need help.
How do they get in touch with you?
Angels of East Africa. If you go to Angels of East Africa, you can see our website, angelsofeastafrica.org. And if you can't remember that, remember Machine Gun Preacher. You can Google it, and you'll come up with everything you need to know about me. Machine Gun Preacher.
The information's on your screen. If you want more information, contact us here at KNLJ, and we will tell you about it. Don't tell us God can't change a life. Let's talk about that, because I could only imagine, even though when we're in the midst of all of that sin and all of that darkness, and we think that it's comfortable, and it was comfortable for you for a while, many of us live in that pain because when we get out of it, we're uncomfortable. We're not in that environment, and we don't know how to go on. It had to be a very hopeless existence.
I would have to say that I was never comfortable in it. The drugs gave me a substitute for being comfortable and being satisfied. I knew at 11 years old that if something happened to me, I was going straight to hell. I knew at 12 years old. I knew at 16, 18, 20 years old. I knew if I died, I was going straight to hell. But the drugs were like a substitute to making everything, to making me feel better. You know, so I knew the right way. I knew when I was 7 years old that I was going to be a pastor. There was a prophecy giving before I was in my mother's womb. She lost a child. A prophecy was given that her next child was going to be a pastor. When I was in the womb, another preacher prophesied that I was going to be a pastor. When I was 5 years old and stood beside her at an old-fashioned camp meeting, another minister prophesied that I was going to be a pastor. And when I was 18 years old, my mother thought they were all liars.
I was going to say, at some point, your mom had to think, now wait a minute.
I'm telling you, but there's one thing about my mom, if you'd know her, she was a true prayer warrior. So she never gave up on that prophecy. No matter where I was in life, no matter what I was doing, no matter what was said about me, no matter what I got arrested for, no matter what the cause was, she still remembered the prophecy. And she kept speaking it and kept speaking.
She hung on, she clung to God's word. And she
Absolutely.
She hung on to the love she had for the Lord and for her son. Quickly tell us what happened that changed you and brought you to Christ.
You know, I was in a shootout in Florida, and I knew that I was going to die for not a good reason, you know, or purpose. So I told my wife, I said, we got to move out of here. Because if you want to change your life and you're living a life where all your friends are living that same life of sin, and I won't say just a life of sin, a life of destruction. That's what I was living. You got to get completely out of that atmosphere. So I knew I had to totally relocate. So I told my wife, I said, we need to move. And I said, let's move back to my hometown, Pennsylvania. So we moved back to my hometown, but you know, my wife was only there like 2 weeks. She went to church with my mom, gave her heart to the Lord. She started, bam, right on fire for God. But I was still tampering. I started running drugs from Florida up to Pennsylvania, and I'd done that for a little over a year. I was still drinking. I was still fighting. I mean, so things were starting to go bad. And then finally, I went to an old-fashioned camp meeting. I was sitting in the back of the church. And I went there only to keep my wife quiet because she kept hounding me to go. So finally I said to her, all right, I'm going to shut her up. So I'll just tell her I'll go. So I went to this camp meeting, and as this minister was preaching, it was like he was preaching to me. And he gave an altar call, and I still sat in the back seat. And he come walking back, and I'll never forget, he said to me, what is your problem, man? The power of God is all over you. What is your problem? And I broke right there. And I gave my heart to the Lord. And the camp meeting was going on like for 5-6 nights, okay? So I'm the kind of person, if I get a little taste of something, it's almost like a buffet. You know, I get a little taste of something. If you go to your favorite buffet, you're going to go back to that same food that you just love, that you just desire, and you're going to keep getting more and more and more. So anyways, when I went back the next night, I knew what I wanted was in the front. So I went from the back of the church, from the very back row to the very front row. Because I figured, well, I tell you what, when this thing starts coming out, I'm going to be the first one to get it on my plate. I'm going to be the first one up there. When he gave that altar call the second night, I literally was right there. I was the first one. But you know, something happened that night. This preacher started prophesying over me. And, you know, I just got saved. And the more he prophesied, the madder I got. And I said, you know what? There's a 48-hour clause. When you just get saved in 48 hours, you can actually beat a preacher up. At least I thought that anyhow. So anyways, the more he prophesied, the madder I got. And I figured, you know what? I'm going to meet this preacher outside. I'm thinking this at the altar. I'm going to meet him outside. I'm going to beat this man for what he's saying. So I'll never forget, I go outside of the church, and here comes the preacher. And as soon as he come through the door, I'm standing there smoking a cigarette, and I started on him. I mean, saying a few cuss words, and I told him, I said, preacher, don't you tell me I'm going to Africa. Don't you tell me I'm going to be in a war. Those people got themselves in a mess in Africa. Don't tell me I'm going over there to be with them. And all he said, we all know how almost every preacher has that little smirk, that little grin. You know what I'm saying? Yes. I think they teach you that in preacher school. So anyways, he gave me a grin, and all he said was, we'll see. And that was in 1992. In 1998, I took my first trip into Africa.
And that's where we're going to stop for right now. What happened when Sam got to Africa? Was the preacher right? Has he turned his life around? We're going to let you know. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to New Horizons. We're talking with Sam Childers today, the machine gun preacher. And I tell you what, he's got me on the edge of my seat, and I'm sure he does you too. Sam, you were sharing with us that you had such a destructive lifestyle, but you were raised in a Christian home. You knew right from wrong. You just chose to do wrong.
Right.
And you said you knew you were going to go to hell, and you were okay with dying, but you wanted to know what you were dying for and that there was a purpose.
Right.
Gave your heart to the Lord, came out of that. A pastor prophesied over you, said you were going to go to Africa. You were going to beat him up because you didn't like what he had to say.
Yeah.
Pick up the story.
So anyways, that was in 1992, June of 1992. And one thing about me, if I was ever going to do something, I was going to do it at the very best that I could do it, and I was going to go all the way. From the time I started serving Christ, I'm not going to say I've never failed or I've never stumbled, but I've never went back. I kept going forward. So anyways, in 1998, I find myself in Africa in the middle of a roadblock. And when I'm in this roadblock, there was drunk soldiers there, and there was a soldier pointing a gun in my head. You got to remember, a pastor prophesied that I was going to Africa, that I was going to be in a war, and he's just going on prophesying, and all of a sudden I find myself 6 years later sitting in an automobile with an AK-47 pointed at my head.
How did you, why were you in Africa?
I was a contractor. I had a construction company at the time, and this guy was putting steel roofs on these buildings. So I went there to literally help him put the steel roofs on these buildings.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily a mission trip, that you're now this...
Well, I went there on a 5-week trip in order to help him work on these buildings.
Okay, so you're there, the man's got a gun pointed at you.
The man got a gun pointed at me, and anyways, I looked at the guy that was driving, and I said, just follow my lead. And the guy started to say, no, Sam. And instantly, the guy had a hold of the gun, and I know guns. I know about all guns, you know, most of them. So anyways, I seen the safety was on the gun. And he's gripping onto this gun, I mean, really holding on tight. So I grabbed the barrel, and when I pulled it, he busted his head on the top of the car. And blood flew everywhere. I jumped out of the car. I grabbed the gun. There was 2 other soldiers there. One took off running. I took the guys on and everything. But I looked back in the car. This is what was so funny. I looked back in the car that the guy that was driving, and here was that preacher with that grin on his face. He was the guy driving the car. Yeah. And then is when I realized that prophecy is true. That we are the only one that can stop prophecy. And that is if we totally turn our life around and go the opposite way from Christ. We can stop it. But I never did.
What happened when you were in Africa? Because that's where
what happened, I started helping this other preacher, and you know, he had a different purpose in Africa than I had. And I knew I had to go off on my own. So I went to the total other side of Sudan. And when I went to the other side of Sudan, what sent me there was, I heard there was a rebel group that was cutting the arms and legs off of children, cutting the lips off of children. So I figured, you know, this is where I'm going to go. This guy wants to fight. I'm going to hunt him down. We're going to fight, you know. So I went over to the other side of Sudan. My very first trip in, going into this area, I seen them, they just burned a vehicle, and there was dead people alongside of the road. And I knew, and I know to most people this might sound crazy, but I knew I was where God wanted me when I seen that. And as time went on, I opened up a mobile clinic. I run a mobile clinic for a couple years. And finally, one day, we're driving down the road in this mobile clinic. I had soldiers with me and everything, because naturally, being in a war zone, I mean, I'm not totally stupid. I wanted guys with me that had guns. So we're driving down this road, and it was like God said, stop. Stop right here. And I stopped, and I hopped out, and I grabbed my AK, and I jump out of the vehicle, and I'm kind of walking around, and God said, this is where I want you to build the children's village. And I'll never forget it, because I remember saying to God, God, I think you're wrong. This is not a very good place, God. God, this is not, we need to go closer to town, God. This is not a good place out here. God, people's dying out here. This is not a good, you know, so I'm standing there arguing with God, telling him, God, I think you're making a mistake. And he said, no, this is where I want the children's village. So the very next day, we started clearing the ground and started working there. The government actually come out and they said, Reverend, you can't build this orphanage here. And I said, I know, I agree with you, but you talk to God. Because God said he wants it here. And he said, Reverend, you can't. The rebels are going to kill you here. And I'll never forget, I even said to the government, I says, I know, but you don't understand. God said to build it here. I know, I'm probably going to die here. Well, needless to say, where the orphanage is in South Sudan right now was one of the heaviest areas for attacks from the Lord-resistant army. There's been more people killed along that river bank than you could ever imagine. They have even cut the babies out of women's bellies in that area. I mean, but that's where God said to build the orphanage. We started it. Right now, it's one of the largest orphanages in South Sudan, one of the largest. And we built it. It has dormitories. It has a large church. It has a library. It has all of these things there. And I never got killed building it.
That's an amazing story, and we have about a minute left in this segment before we break again, Sam. And folks that are watching are thinking, well, this is one tough guy. This really is one tough guy, but I have a question for you. What is it that breaks your heart?
The children that I could not rescue. You know, I've been there all these years rescuing children. And a matter of fact, in 2004, Dateline heard about me. And Dateline got a hold of me, and they came in to do a story, and they ended up doing a 1-hour story on me that aired the first part of 2005. And that was what began to change in my life big time. And I'm going to share that with you next.
As I told you at the beginning of the program, you can never think or imagine what God has in store for you, but it starts with you humbling yourself and crying out to him and giving him 100% of yourself. Stay tuned, and we'll hear the rest of Sam's story when we return. Hello and welcome back. I'm Karen Dye, and you're watching New Horizons. Sam Childers is with us today. Now, Sam, you have shared some amazing stories and miraculous stories where you know that the hand of God was on your life. Otherwise, I don't think you'd be sitting here talking to me right now. And he has given you a bigger mission and a bigger purpose. And your heart, as hard as it was, he remained in control of part of it to keep it soft. And so now you're working for these children in Africa and in the Sudan and just doing some amazing things and opening the orphanage. You say it all turned around for you as far as getting the word out about what you were doing when you were interviewed on Dateline NBC.
Yeah.
God is so cool in the way he does those things.
I'm telling you.
So what happened after that?
I wasn't just interviewed by Dateline NBC. Dateline NBC actually sent a camera crew into Africa with me. And here they started seeing how I was rescuing the children of South Sudan from this army called the Lord-resistant Army, Joseph Kony. So anyways, as I was rescuing the children back, they'd done this story. And it was really amazing because I'll never forget when it came out. It was in the spring of 2005, I believe it was, May or June, almost in May. I was sitting on the couch with my wife, and when the show aired, I started crying because they made me out to be a mercenary. And I'll never forget this. All I could see was myself walking down the road with all these children with a machine gun on my back and a pistol in my side, and they made me out to be this mercenary, and I started crying. I said to my wife, I said, every church that ever had me in is never going to have me back again. The whole ministry is going to fall apart. From that day forth, or that afternoon that it was aired, our website crashed by morning. We had so many hits. I went from preaching in churches of 50 or 100 to 1,000 or 5,000 because everyone wanted to know what gave me that power to go in there to fight this evil man that was plumb full of the devil, because they wanted to put it to the same work here in America in spiritual warfare. So, I mean, everything kind of turned around. So I preach in churches of 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 people now. I still preach in small churches, but most of the time what I preach is how to literally fight spiritual warfare.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that really is what it is, isn't it, Sam?
Absolutely.
And
You know,
a lot of people would watch you and think, oh, this is just a guy who loves a fight. This is just a guy who wants to go in. But this is a guy who God changed and then took what he's good at and is now using it to fight
what I
that
found
battle.
out, and what a lot of Christians don't realize, it's easy to go out here and fight physically.
Right.
That's the easiest thing there is. You don't have to be too smart to do it. You know, we just heard what you do at the buffet. If they run, I mean, if they run out, somebody gets it. Yeah, I mean, what is it at Arby's? If they run out of horseradish sauce, there's trouble.
That's right.
But you know what? It's easy for us to blow up like that and to fight.
That's right.
But when it's spiritual, and we got to literally get down and begin to pray and to pray through. You know, the average Christian nowadays, come on, I got a little gray hair on me. I know what it is to pray through. I remember back when I was a kid, when Mom and Dad would go to the church, somebody would need a deliverance. They'd say, all right, we're going to pray this thing through. And it was like, oh no, I got to sleep on the pew again tonight. Because we knew we weren't leaving until you were prayed through, you know. But that's a lot of what I take it, and I take the fighting in the battlefield and I turn it around to the fighting in the battlefield here in America. Because no matter what, each and every one of us, if you don't have a fight today and you don't have one tomorrow, get ready, because it's coming this week.
That's exactly
And you
right.
will have a fight. But that's when the book started.
I was going to say, now tell us about the book,
What happened was the very next day we had close to 300 emails from book writers to movie producers, you name it. Everyone you could imagine was emailing us. And I took only one of them and put it in my briefcase. Only one email. Tossed all the other ones. I'm in L.A. Somebody got a hold of me about writing a book, and I'm in L.A., and I called this one lady. I met this person, and I called this lady, and the next thing I known, this lady said, Sam, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. And here I am. Here's the man that was doing drugs during school. Right. Here's the man that 30 years ago couldn't read or write, and I just finally learned how to read and couldn't write very good. Going to write a book? So anyways, this lady talked me into putting my story on paper. So that's what I did. And then it went from not just a normal book. Thomas Nelson bought the book rights. You know, a lot of people write books. I sold my book to Thomas Nelson. And it was done as a hardback book.
It's an amazing thing how God takes the things of the foolish.
Yeah, absolutely.
To confound the wise. You also have a movie that you're working on that will be coming out.
Just recently, I sold the motion picture rights. And, you know, it's something because I have no education besides the Holy Spirit. And people wanted to buy my book rights, my movie rights, my reality rights. They wanted to buy it all at one time. And I said, no, no. I sold everything separately. And so I sold the movie rights, so there's a movie coming out. Gerard Butler is going to play the leading role. And see, here's something about God. When God truly does something, and it's God in it, He does it to the full extent.
Over and above.
Lionsgate is involved in it. Mark Forrester is the director of the movie, which, I mean, he's one of the top 10 in Hollywood. Gerard Butler is like rated at number 3 in Hollywood right now. The guy that done the screenwriting, Jason Keller, is literally one of the top 10 in Hollywood too. So that's being done, but listen, God's not finished. You know, sometimes we start getting up here with God's work, we think He's done, so we're going to relax, but God says He's not done. So I kept my reality show rights, so we actually have a reality show that will be coming out in 2011 that is all about giving people a second chance.
There's so much to this man's story, and we only have a half hour to tell it in, and I know that something that really is on your heart is your mission that you do in Darfur, and we have about 30 seconds.
I just started in Darfur. What I want to close with is we have a budget we're trying to meet by the end of October, and there's people in Darfur right now that are literally eating dirt. You've seen the video. They're drinking water that we could not even give to an animal to drink. We're going in to increase our feeding program and drill wells, and I need help.
How do they get in touch with you?
Angels of East Africa. If you go to Angels of East Africa, you can see our website, angelsofeastafrica.org. And if you can't remember that, remember Machine Gun Preacher. You can Google it, and you'll come up with everything you need to know about me. Machine Gun Preacher.
The information's on your screen. If you want more information, contact us here at KNLJ, and we will tell you about it. Don't tell us God can't change a life.
Sam Childers, who has been dubbed the Machine Gun Preacher. So please join Joni and me as we welcome Sam Childers to Celebration. Sam,
Great
God
job.
bless you. All right. And he's written a book, Joni, entitled Another Man's War. And it's a hardback book, and we'll put up the information. The true story of one man's battle to save children in the Sudan. And I think most everybody is at least somewhat aware of the terrible situation happening in the Sudan. Sudan is run by a dictator, but then there's a part of Sudan that's kind of like no man's land, where it's just anarchy, chaos. Nobody's really in control. It's civil war. There's rebels. It is just a deplorable situation. Okay, so Sam, I guess the first question is, and by the way, there is a movie being made about your life. Do you know when that's going to be coming out?
It's already shot. It's in editing right now, so they're saying September, October next year.
All right, so why in the world, do Joni and I need to be in fear of our lives? You're called the Machine Gun Preacher. Is that because you preach real fast like a machine gun, or you have a machine gun, or you use a machine gun? What's the deal on that?
I have many machine guns, and I have many guns. I normally carry a gun all the time. I'm fully licensed for carrying a gun.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I've had
I'm
a lot
sure
of training.
that's got to be a Harley, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of Harleys. I actually build motorcycles too.
Okay.
Yeah, so God has been good. You know, they say that He'll give you your heart's desires, but first you must follow Him.
Yes.
And I followed Him, and I gave everything up for many, many years, many years. But I always had a dream of building motorcycles, so I got to work some with Jesse James and stuff a couple years ago. And now I build my own motorcycle called MGP Rat Bikes.
That's great.
Wow. Okay. So why do you carry machine guns?
I've been in Sudan working for 14 years, and I work in the war zone area. I believe that when God took me into Sudan, I seen a body of a small child that stepped on a landmine. I knew I could do something. And James chapter 4, verse 17 says, if you know you should do something and then not do it, you have sinned. I knew I could do something mainly because of my past. I was a drug dealer. I worked as a shotgunner for many years. I was a hired gun. And,
so you were like an enforcer. So
yeah,
in other words, when there'd be a failed drug deal or somebody didn't pay, you were hired to be the muscle man to make them pay. Is that kind of what happened?
I've done a lot of bad things. And I've always said that if God can use me, imagine what He can do in your life.
So before we get you into Africa, we've got to get you saved. So right now you're going around beating up people, shooting people, whatever. So how did you
I never shot anyone that didn't need to be shot.
Okay. All right. I bet they might disagree, but that's probably true. So Sam, so you're in this, how long did you live that kind of lifestyle?
Until 1992, June of 1992.
And so in 92 you were how old?
In June of 1992, I went to an old-fashioned camp meeting at Assembly of God Church. And God moved on me, and it's really crazy what happened that night. I sat in the back row and ended up making a long story short. The preacher come back to me, and I gave my heart to the Lord in that back row. Went back the next night because I wanted more of what I got in the back row. But I figured if you can get that in the back row, you can get more in the front.
Yeah.
So I went straight to the front row, and he gave an altar call, and I was the first one up there. But this man started prophesying over me. And the more he prophesied, the madder I got. And I figured, well, there's a 48-hour clause. If you just get saved, you can beat a preacher up in 48 hours, they say. I don't know. I made that up. But anyways, I figured, you know, I'm going to beat this guy after church. So I went outside and waited on him. Because he started telling me that I was going to Africa. He started telling me I was going to be in a war. He started prophesying all these things to me that I didn't want to do. So he come out of the church, and I started giving him some choice words. And I mean, I'm really on this guy. And all he said was, we'll see. In 1998, I found myself in Sudan, Africa, in the middle of a war. So everything he prophesied that night, 6 years later, came
Well, I'm
true.
glad you didn't beat him up or shoot him with a machine gun.
Well, and the thing about it is, even though, I mean, that's kind of like everybody's nightmare to think they get saved and God's going to call them to Africa, but the truth of the matter is...
Oh, that used to be the joke when I was in college.
Yeah.
Huh.
But the truth of the matter is that when you set foot into Africa, into Sudan, that's where your heart was.
Absolutely.
And that's what your calling was, and that's what your vision was, and that's what your purpose was.
Absolutely.
And what happened when you felt all of that destiny coming right in front of you like that? And could go into this region. Tell us a little bit about how dangerous that it is, and that's why you do have to carry machine guns.
In a sense, your past prepared you
absolutely
to be able to handle this rough, tough, dangerous situation. This is, in a sense, a religious civil war of Muslims versus Christians, kind of like. Some video. Let's go now to Darfur, Sudan, Africa.
I tell people all the time, a lot of people says, I gave my heart to the Lord. God just don't want your heart. He wants all of you.
Yes.
He wants all of you, everything. He wants your past. He wants everything. And if you truly give him everything, he'll find a place for you. And I believe God looked down at me and said, wow, this guy's messed up, man. What am I going to do with him? Well, he put me in a war. And I'm happy there. We've rescued over 1,000 children right now from the war.
Wow.
All right, we're seeing some pictures. We're going to do a roll in a moment. Tell us about what we're seeing here, Sam.
This is actually on the front lines down inside of like bomb shelters and stuff in the front lines. And this area here was a heavy active area. This was a bus that was ambushed by the LRA. I've been ambushed over 10 times now.
All right, LRA.
The Lord Resistant Army. But see, the big problem is in Sudan.
But they're not really working for the Lord, are they?
No, they're the Lord Resistant Army. But a lot of people want to say these little rebel groups are the problem. They're not the problem. It's the president of northern Sudan, Bashir. Bashir is the problem. Bashir has had war crime charges put against him. They have tried to kill me many times because I speak out. I'm not afraid to speak out on TV or wherever I'm at. This man is a problem. He has caused a genocide inside of Darfur. He has caused a genocide inside of South Sudan. Right now, January 9th, they will be in voting, where they're voting for either freedom or the country to run under Arabic law. As Christians, we need to be praying very hard that this country is going to be separated from the south to the north. More than that, we need to be praying that Bashir is taken out of office. This man has literally murdered hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, murdered them.
So this is, in a sense, a religious civil war of Muslims versus Christians, kind of like.
Absolutely. Now, sometimes they'll call it a holy war. I mean, but you know, in Darfur, it's Muslims fighting Muslims. But the one Muslims in Darfur, the SLA, that's fighting, the Janjaweed, they're fighting for freedom. And I love a Muslim that's fighting for freedom because they're easy to convert. You know, because there's only one freedom, and that's through Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we got some video. Let's go now to Darfur, Sudan, Africa. He would get out there with the sinners. He loved the sinners. He wasn't ashamed or embarrassed to get out there and fellowship with them and love them and care for them. Well, keep calling if you prayed that prayer. And we've got Dr. Jeffrey Seif is here today. Joshua Dufresne is here today with their wonderful band. But here's a song entitled, Your Love Set Me Free. If we can pray with you in any way, go to the phone and call in Jesus' name.
Kind of, you know, white American guy coming into the country? Did you?
You know, no, I haven't been. You know, I think some of the reporters try to say that sometimes, but if you watch the movie, it's clear that I wasn't some white savior. If anything, the children of Sudan saved me.
How was that? Tell me a little bit.
You know, the children gave me a purpose. I wasn't always a good person in life, so I believe probably the only good thing that I ever done and stuck to doing was helping the children of Sudan, which turned into not just helping children of Sudan, but helping children around the world.
It also was unclear to me how it worked out, the sort of initial cost to your family. You were in danger of losing your home, but it said in the material that you were still in the same home. So how did that all work out?
You know, I actually had a foreclosure note on my home. They were taking the home. This was a number of years ago. I lost my son. My son was killed. I mean, everything in the world was falling apart. But I never gave up on God. And see, that's the whole thing to the key of being successful, is don't give up on God. Even in the middle of a storm, when everything's falling apart, I never gave up. I stumbled. I might have fell down on my face, but I always got back up and kept going on.
It appears from the movie that, you know, you've engaged in some warfare violence. You said, I watched an interview with you where you said sometimes you're called a mercenary.
Yeah, you know,
how do you reconcile
I always tell people I wished I was a mercenary. They make a lot of money.
Well, how do you reconcile the violence with your faith?
You know, you got to remember the movie was amped up. Okay, naturally it was amped up. It was Hollywood, but at the same time, I'm not trying to condone violence. I'm not trying to say what I've done was ever proper or right. But I will ask you this: you have children?
I do.
Somebody took your child. Would you want me to bring your child home?
I would.
Okay, that's what I do. I rescue children.
Your dad was a Marine. I don't know if he's still alive.
Yeah, he was an Indian Marine.
So, and I believe he was a person of faith as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did he ever talk about that and how reconciling being a soldier with being a...
No, my dad brought us up to always take a stand and take up for people that couldn't fight for themselves. Yeah, I mean, he brought us up like that since a small child.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, bless you.
Did you ever expect your life to be on the big screen like this? And how
No,
did that ever come to pass?
It all started from NBC Dateline. I was featured on there in 2005, and that's how everything got started. But I never suspected this to ever happen. But I thank God that it gives me an opportunity now to speak out my faith. But not just speak out my faith, to let people know why these children are dying. And that's because of the president of Northern Sudan, Bashir. This man has caused a genocide, and that's what I want every reporter that I talk to realize. He's still in office, and there's thousands of children dying.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, let me just ask you, how many children are in your orphanages now?
I have 179 children that are on my projects in Uganda. I have homes in Uganda. I have children that's going to university, plus the children on the orphanage also. Now, we just started work in Ethiopia. I hope to increase more feeding programs in Ethiopia over the next few months.
So how many staff do you have that are working at all of these?
In Sudan and Uganda, we have 56 people that's on the payroll every month. That's not including the people we have here in the U.S. in our office. All right, thank you.